Hey, there we go. Okay, hi everybody. My name is Peter, and this is Stacks and Facts, and I'm super excited to have you here. And also our special guest, if I can get her to go onto the screen, Kati Morton.
Thanks for having me, Peter. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you. So, everybody, I'm just going to tell you, if you don't know, you probably do, because Katie's great. So Kati is a licensed therapist, licensed marriage and family therapist, down in LA, and she also runs a YouTube channel called Kati Morton, which is great. You know, having channels after your own name is very easy for branding. But also, Kati wrote her very first book back in 2018 called Are You Okay? As a way to help people talk about mental health and mental illness and when they need to talk about it, which is frankly all the time. So I'm super jazzed that we can have you here to talk to us about your book and about mental health and about literally everything that we can think of in this very short hour time that we've got.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk about it as well.
Excellent. So after that whirlwind of an introduction, is there anything you can think of that I didn't mention that's worth knowing about you?
Not really. I mean, I specialize in my private practice in eating disorders and self-injury work. And I've been on YouTube for 8.5 years now.
Wow.
I know. Time flies.
Yeah. Yeah. I was actually, one of the things I was thinking about when I was getting ready for this was, it was either 2017 or 2018 when you were doing the keynote at VidCon.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, wasn't that?
Yeah, crying in public.
Oh,
not my favorite thing.
But you know, so great, so great. I think it was really apropos for the moment. And it seems like you've done a really good job at using your platform for good. So yeah, glad to have you.
Yeah.
So let's just kind of jump into it. My first question is about Are You Okay? My understanding is this is your first book, right? Or
yes,
that was
correct.
Your first book.
That was my first book. Yes.
Why book?
A couple of reasons. First, it gives me more space to explain things. YouTube isn't always the greatest for that because people have short attention spans. Mm-hmm. I'm one of them. I totally get it. But a book gives you just more space to tell people how terms came to be, what things are. And Are You Okay? Is just a where to start, what to ask. Because through being online for 8.5 years, I've realized that a lot of people just don't know what they don't know. Right? Like there are a lot of things in life that I don't know about. And so because I don't know anything, I don't even know what questions to ask to learn more. And I found that because of my education and living in a, affluent area where mental health is easily accessible and talked about a lot, I was at an advantage and I wanted to share that with other people who might not be in such a position. Kind of the same reason for my YouTube channel. And books are just another medium, another way to reach people. Some people prefer to read things, be able to, I like the, actual tangible nature of books. I'm not much of an audiobook person, but I did the audiobook myself. Yeah, it'd be funny if it was somebody else, I think. So that's why the book. And I think it was just another way to hopefully help people and reach them where they're at. It's okay.
One of the reasons that you started the book is overlaps with the channel. Like you wanted to give people a chance to have access to this thing that people don't always have access to. Can you talk a bit about the differences in terms of making a YouTube channel versus writing a book and what that lets you do?
Yeah, both of them, I think by and large, YouTube allows me to reach people around the world, which is cool.
Yeah.
Never have I ever been able to simultaneously have conversations with people in California and South Africa. That's just blows my mind every time. Mm-hmm. So that's a really great way to reach people. But I think books, by and large, I don't want to say that only older people read books, but a lot of my audience actually is older mm-hmm. comparative to those on YouTube. A lot of my friends have demographics of viewers that are in the 10 to 12 to 13-year-old range. And I have those viewers, but mine are more in the 30, 40, 50-year-old range. And I feel like books are better able to reach those people too. Yeah. They're more apt to be searching for content in a book form, maybe instead of YouTube, because I'm 36 years old and I didn't have the internet. If you can imagine, we didn't have the internet.
How weird, right?
Yeah, and we had encyclopedias and try searching for things on that.
Right.
It was all sorts of, questions I'd ask my mom, and she'd be like, well, you have to figure it out yourself. And I'd be like, the Dewey Decimal System, we're good friends. Like I had to get used to all that stuff. And so anyway, so I think that while like both YouTube and the book world are equally important in my eyes, because it reaches a different demographic, and it, again, like kind of going back to what I said, like it meets people where they're at.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I just want to be able to reach as many people as possible.
For
and
sure.
I think books were just another way to do that.
Yeah, for sure. I think one of the things I really like about books, also for those of you who don't know who I am, I'm a librarian by training.
Yes.
I
I should have introduced you.
I mean, we can after this. Who knows? A thing I really like about books is that it's really intimate. Like, it gives you a chance to sit with the author and the author's thoughts in a very similar way that, like, you can on YouTube. Like, you don't have their face there, but you have their voice. And with a book versus on YouTube, up until, like, the past couple of years anyways, like, with a book, you can really spend time to go in depth on an idea. You can be a little bit more, in depth, rather than just doing a bunch of small things because you're worried about view time or retention or whatever the heck.
Whatever YouTube's waiting more now. Nobody knows. It's all over the place, right?
Who knows? Who knows? But yeah, and then the other nice thing about books is, it does, like, there's this idea that a lot of people have access to the internet, and a lot of people do have access to the internet. But one thing that I've learned being a public librarian is that way more people don't have access to the internet than most people realize. And a lot of people do still come to the library for the books themselves. And so by putting a book out there, you are increasing access to mental health knowledge and mental health resources to folks who don't have that. So yeah, books are pretty cool that way.
They are really cool. That's why I'd also made a big push when the book had come out for people to ask their local library to pick up a copy, because if people can't afford to purchase it, like, I don't know everyone's financial situation, and I didn't want it to be something that wasn't accessible. Like, that's why what I love about YouTube is the information is free.
Yeah.
You can access it anytime, but you do have to have access to the internet, which comes with its own cost.
Yes.
And so I encouraged my community to go to the libraries and have them pick up a copy, because they have budgets for that.
Yeah, exactly.
And then one copy could, be sitting on the shelf when someone needs it. And that's a really cool thing. They could check it out for free.
Yeah. And then that single book that, like, might have otherwise been read once or twice now gets read like 30 times. And then when it's worn out, it gets replaced for the next 30 or 20 or however many people.
It's very cool.
So, talking about your book, one of the things that I thought was really good that you covered in it, right at the beginning, is the idea of mental health versus mental illness. Can you, for those of you who haven't read the book, can you kind of talk about why it's important to distinguish those two things from each other?
Yeah, of course. The thing about mental health versus mental illness is I feel like the word mental illness has such a stigma.
Yeah.
So people talk about mental illnesses, but they call them mental health issues. And so I personally have been trying to use the proper language myself as to not increase the stigma. But mental health is something we all have, just like we have a physical health, right? Like, I could catch a cold. Like right now we're in the middle of a pandemic. I could get sick with COVID-19 and then I would be like physically ill, right? I would have a physical illness, and there wouldn't be any judgment around that. I'd be like, oh, you got the flu? You got the flu. You're physically ill. But for some reason, when we have a mental illness, there's a little bit more judgment around that. But so a mental health is just something we all have that we have to take care of. Basic self-care, checking in with ourselves, having a support system, whether that's friends, family, people online, all of that stuff. But when we get to a point where we can't function in our daily life, meaning, let's say it's hard for me to get to school or work or get up in the morning, take care of my basic needs. Maybe I can't shower. Maybe, I'm struggling to feed myself regularly or healthfully. All of that stuff is like completely out of balance, and I'm not my best self. That's when it becomes a mental illness. And that could be anything from depression, anxiety. We've all heard different mental illness terms. But that's really the difference. Is just like we have a mental health that needs to be taken care of. And some of us will have times or, a long period in our life where we're not able to function, and that mental health is now a mental illness. And, that I always like to compare it to physical, because people are that's so much easier to conceptualize.
Yeah. And that actually brings up a good point. that I just kind of was thinking about is, so there is a stigma around mental health and mental illness, and they kind of overlap sometimes. But one of the things that I was thinking about is how, so there's, depending on where you're at and depending on what country you live in, you have easier access to healthcare for your body than you do necessarily in than for your brain and for your heart. I say heart because I have a heart condition, but that's not what I mean. You know what I mean.
Yes, I know what you mean.
Do you think that maybe the way that the healthcare system is set up kind of reinforces those attitudes and the stigma? Like, if you can't get proper healthcare, if it's not covered, your mental health, maybe that makes people think that it's not as much of a thing.
Yeah, it's not as important. I also think, like, if you realize when psychology became a thing, it's a very young science. If you look back to when Freud was, doing his thing, even like I'm writing something right now, and I'm talking about attachment theory, and we know that as like fact in 2020, but this wasn't around until 1960. Yeah. So you think of that, seems like a long time ago, but it's really not. And so there are a lot of compounding issues that I believe lead to the stigma of mental illness. Part of it is coverage. Yeah. And also it's thinking, like I've heard from a lot of my viewers who grew up maybe in poverty or in a lower, socioeconomic status where mental health issues were seen as like a rich person problem because all your basic, like we know the hierarchy of needs, not to get too nerdy on you, but like there's a hierarchy of needs. If you want to look it up, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, very fascinating. Yeah. But it's like once your basic needs are met, then you can look for like enlightenment and like, how do I feel about things, right? And so so there's that kind of stigma too, right? Oh, this isn't something that affects us. Yeah. This only affects, rich people. And then not to mention the fact that you can't see it. So in the way that we can swab our throat, put it on a petri dish and be like, that's strep throat, or my leg is broken. It doesn't work. You can see that. Yeah. Yeah. Mental health is a little different, right? And so a lot of times because it's not seen, it's not covered, and it's been something that's only accessible to a certain class of people, I feel like all of that compounded makes it really hard for all of us who all have mental health to take care of it. Yeah. But it's changing. Things are changing. Accessibility is increasing. And I think that's great.
Yeah. So talking about that, the change in access to mental health and the change in ideas around mental health. I mean, you said that it's changing. How does that, like, how do you see that? Is it just like people coming in? Is it people finding you on the internet and saying, hey? Is it opportunities that present themselves to you?
Yeah, I think it's all of those things. Part of it, like when I first started out, there was no other mental health channel that I was aware of. Maybe you guys let me know if 2011 there was somebody, you tell me. But that's when I started my channel, and I was definitely a weird YouTuber. Like people are like, well, you had a career before. Wait, yeah. So you're in mental health. Wait, you're a therapist. It was so confusing for people to understand, even with YouTube, building my relationship within the company itself. They're like, wait, so it's education, but it's not like math or science. And I was like, no, but it's a social science. It's like no one knew what to do with it. Yeah. And so, but now you flash forward 8.5 years later, and there are a lot of different channels, from people sharing their own mental health stories and experiences and resources to other clinicians in the space, which is great because I'm not going to work for everybody, right? Like we need different types of people, different viewpoints, experiences. And then the conversations online, everything from like collaborations I've done with other creators. Like everybody knows Shane Dawson. I was part of one of his series it was like a year or two ago. And that was a huge opportunity for me to make people aware that, there's a mental health channel. Mental health information is free and you can have access to it. Yeah. And then even just like the conversation with my viewers online has changed. Back in the day, I always use this as an example because it's kind of funny and it shows the stark contrast from then to now. Yeah. I would follow people on Twitter who had hashtags about mental health or eating disorders, and they would reply like, who are you? Why is a therapist trying to follow me? It was like, what are you doing? Like they were not comfortable. This is thing.
Oh,
Even
there we go. Yeah, it froze for a second, but
Okay. But I have a Facebook group that I'm not even in that often, that my viewers just exchange information, talk about things, share helpful resources. So it's really come a long way. We still have a long ways to go. But you see celebrities talking about mental health issues, everyone from Chrissy Teigen saying she had postpartum depression and postpartum anxiety. There was this rapper, Kid Cudi, a couple years ago who checked himself in for suicidal thoughts and was like, hey, I've been depressed for years. People need to talk about this. So it's definitely getting better. And hopefully it will just continue to get better.
Yeah, I think so. So I actually kind of wanted to ask you about some of those opportunities that came up. So, for example, speaking at VidCon, how did someone come up to you, or did you say, hey, I'd like to talk about this? How did that happen?
Oh, no. Yeah. My partner manager. So when you're a creator, I think because I've been such a bizarre creator, I've had a partner manager way earlier than most people. Like I know friends who have larger channels. They're like, wait, you have a person? I'm like, yeah. So my partner manager at the time, her name was Monica. She had reached out because she was like, hey, Susan usually speaks at VidCon, the CEO of YouTube. She's like, but this year we're going to have Neil because there's new products coming out and he's part of that team. And because you use the community tab on YouTube so much, we would love to have you talk about community. And that's just how it came to be. And then I asked if I could share like stories from my viewers because community is really what my channel's about. And after reviewing a few of the stories, they were like, okay, you can share this one. That's okay. And and then just preparing, I think I had like 5 minutes or something. So that's how it happened. I was super nervous. I can even tell in the video, like my voice is like, but yeah, it was really great.
Yeah. And I think like it is one of the things I really liked about the keynote, and probably you've gotten this feedback from other people as well. And I think it's one of those big draws for YouTube itself is like, yeah, you got emotional. But people were able to see that. I think one of the things for me that I talk about fairly often and that I try and model to people generally is that it's okay to have feelings. And it's one of those things that sells really well, which is like a weird thing to sell or a weird thing to say because like that's not the intention. But as far as it being beneficial, if we can model our behavior to other people in a healthy way, then good for us. I'm just going to check the chat real quick and see because I asked if anyone had any questions. There is somebody who goes by TK. It says, question, how are you and Katie doing during the quarantine to keep you sane? You want to go first?
Sure. Hi, TK. I know TK. She's part of my community as well.
Excellent.
So I've been okay. It's ups and downs. I think like everybody, I put a couple of videos out, speaking of like getting emotional. I put a few videos out on my channel about the coronavirus originally and like how I was dealing with it. And it was really hard. And like, I'm still processing what's going on and like this new normal and me hating it and just not being happy and not knowing what to do with it because everybody's hurting, which is a very weird thing. I've never been in an experience where my patients are going through the exact same thing that I'm going through. And this is worldwide, which is just very strange. So I definitely have had ups and downs. And then we had the peaceful protests for Black Lives Matter in my city in Santa Monica. And then we had riots and looting and crazy devastation of our town as well. And so there's all these mixed emotions with that too, and trying to grapple. I think overall, I'd say I've been feeling overwhelmed, often very sad, and then grieving a lot. So yeah, I've been tired. How about you? I know that's very down, but I'm okay. But.
Yeah, for sure. So for me, it's similar, I guess. So for those of you who are new to this channel, I live up in Vancouver, British Columbia, so Canada. And when all of this first started happening, our library was pretty quick to be like, okay, we're closing to the public. We can't. It's not worth the risk, and we were really fortunate that we had really good union representation. And so the union for us was like, hey, we are working with the city to make sure that everyone's job is protected as best as we can. So we got 6 weeks of, like, the city announced they were going to lay people off because they just had to. The budget wasn't there. But the union got them to agree to give everyone 6 weeks of wage protection. So even though I worked, like, I went home and I stayed at home, like I worked 1 day a week at the city's call center for crisis management stuff. But I still got paid my full paycheck. which was really helpful.
Yeah.
But in terms of actually dealing with all of it, it has been really hard being home,
Yeah.
alone. Well, not alone, like with my partner and with my thoughts
Mhm.
and everything going in my life, and seeing everything that's going on. Because, like, it's scary to think that there's a disease out there that might get someone that I care about or get me.
Yeah, I know.
Without divulging personal information too much, like I have a heart condition. My partner has an is immunocompromised,
Hmm.
and it's one of those things where, like, as much as I want to go outside and be around people, that is not the thing to do.
Yeah.
And then, like, professionally as a librarian, I've also been struggling a lot with my duty to make sure that the information that people are getting is accurate.
Hmm.
As with anything that's big and worldwide, there's been a lot of misinformation, and part of that is
Yeah.
intentional, and part of it is just the nature of science is that it changes over time. And with as many scientists around the world focusing on this, there's new information that might contradict something that came out before, but not everybody understands quite that that's just what science does, including myself sometimes.
Hmm.
And so really managing to keep myself sane and healthy. Well, I'm not gonna lie. I've eaten so much chocolate. There's a chocolate shop. This is not a paid sponsorship, but it's called Purdy's.
Uh-huh.
And up until a week ago, I lived right down the street from their factory.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's been horrible for my paycheck, but it's great for my sanity. Um, but yeah, also with the George Floyd getting murdered by the police in Minneapolis is super stressful.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things where it's like, it's nothing new, but it's something I can tell that the society is finally at a point where it doesn't really want to accept this anymore.
Yeah.
But it's been kind of stressful to, like, be in Canada and watch my home country, because I am American, go through everything that it's going and not really feel like I can do a whole lot. Like, I threw as much money as I can to black causes back home, but just a general sense of hopelessness.
Yep.
And
Yeah, totally.
But it's coming along. I always emphasize sleep. I think sleep is beautiful.
It's so important. So
So
important.
yeah. So that's how I've been managing. How about y'all? Let us know in the chat below.
Yeah. Yeah.
Any other questions while I'm thinking about it? So Iridescent Solace says, is there anything you would recommend for people who want to seek help for mental health but cannot afford a therapist currently?
Yeah, there's a lot of resources. I mean, everything from like free resources, meaning it costs you exactly zero. You can get onto like crisis text line if you need just someone to talk with, to vent with. Those are not trained mental health professionals, but they're trained crisis counselors, meaning that crisis text line puts them through a training program and they, graduate and can become a crisis counselor. Then there's also like peer support, like I said, like my Facebook group, Katie, as well as like 7 Cups of Tea. Part of that is free as well. There are ways to upgrade to see a professional, but you don't have to. And then there's like lower cost professional help, like BetterHelp, Talkspace. And like I said, 7 Cups has the ability to pay to see a professional. Those start off, I want to say, at like $40 a month. You can do like email and texting. You can do actual video. There's whatever works for your budget, depending on what you can afford. And then also there is the, I think a lot of people don't know this, but every therapist makes room in their schedule for a low fee patient or free. I've seen patients, I usually make them pay something just so there's a little like, there's a reason that copays exist in the States. If you don't know, our insurance companies they pay for a portion, but you have to pay like $20, $40, something, just so you have some like skin in the game.
Yeah.
You aren't just going to go and not do any work or go when you don't need to. They make sure there's a little bit of a cost to you. And that's why I usually have my patients pay at least like $20 because that's a little bit of a cost to them. But most therapists will work on a sliding scale, meaning you can just ask, hey, do you work on a sliding scale? They'll say yes. Usually then you have a conversation about like what you can afford and what they're willing to do. To give an example, when I was in graduate school, my current therapist was retiring and she gave me some referrals. And so I called up one of the therapists and went in to see her. And we talked about rate, and she said that she does work on a sliding scale. So in that appointment, I was like, hey, I can afford like $70. And she was like, ooh, the lowest I can go is 100. And I was like, ooh, I can only see you a few times. Then do you have other referrals? Like, this isn't going to work for me. So you can kind of navigate that. Yeah. Cool. There's a lot of resources.
Yeah.
Don't think money should be the only way for you to access care.
For sure. And then from my perspective, so I was a grad student recently as well. And while I was that, I was a wellness peer. And so at my school, we got really lucky. Like this, I don't know how the school gets so much money, but we had an office and a space in a really high foot traffic area, and people could come to us with like almost anything. And like I have a bit of training. In a previous life, I used to be a sexual assault victim advocate. And, we would just make ourselves available to people who were in crisis, or even maybe weren't quite in crisis, but were getting really close. And so I imagine a lot of schools offer that as well. And it would be worth it to look, if you're in school, to look and see if they have transitioned to an online form of that.
I'd assume they have.
Yeah.
I would hope so. Because that's how I got most of my therapy, was free through school.
Yep.
For 6 years I was in school. Yeah. I went once a week almost for the entire, and it cost me nothing.
Yeah. And then there's also, because our school also offered like counseling and therapists, but it was such a high demand thing that it was a bit harder to get in. The flip side to that is our school also offered extended healthcare, extended health coverage. So we got like $300 a year for counseling, and I found a therapist in town that had a sliding scale, and so I was able to stretch that out to a few sessions. So there's all of these options, and then of course, who would I be if I didn't plug libraries? Give your local library a call. See, like we as librarians get questions about this stuff all of the time. We can refer you to a local agency or a local organization that provides low or no cost counseling quite quickly.
That's good to know, because I used to work at one of those, and it's really hard for people to locate them. The place I worked at was in North Hollywood, and it's called the Center for Individual and Family Counseling. And people paid nothing up to full fee, but I think most of the patients I saw paid me like $20 an hour, or nothing. And it was just, there are those resources. It's just always hard for people to find them. So libraries are the place to start. That's really cool.
Yeah, libraries, and a lot of people don't think about it because like people think libraries and they think books, but ultimately what a librarian's job and what a library's purpose is in the community is to put people into meaningful contact with the information that they need. And sometimes that's a book, sometimes it's an audiobook, sometimes it's a website, but sometimes that is counseling. And so most public libraries have just huge sheets of all of their community organizations for people to get access to. So
that's so cool.
Yeah, and hopefully that helps you, Iridescent Solace. Let's see what other questions we've got. Also, lots of people in the chat are giving other good feedback. So if you're watching this after the fact, check out the chat. Yes, 75 Sadie Girl says that a lot of employers have an EAP, so an employee assistance program, that can be run either by the employer or, in my case, it was by the union. But that ends up being just a phone number or something, and you can call them, and they'll set you up with either their own therapist or they'll set you up with someone in town. So
yes, and I've actually worked for an EAP when I was first out of undergrad before graduate school, and then one of my first jobs had an EAP. And it is very easy. The one thing I always tell people is, as a therapist, when you see someone who has an EAP, there's like a form they fill out. And just to ensure, and I know this sounds bad, but just to ensure your job protection and your privacy, ask your therapist if you can see the paper before they submit it to your work. Because there might be some things that you're like, hey, I don't want them knowing about this. Like when I use my EAP with my current therapist, she was like, hey, I'm going to put this. Is that okay with you? And I was like, yeah, that's okay. Because it's like your confidentiality, and you hold the privilege. So make sure that you are aware of what they're sharing with your company. But yeah, use that EAP, man. It's like, it's free for you. You get so many sessions. Get on it.
Yeah.
Thanks, Sadie girl.
Yeah, thanks, Sadie. You're great. Let's see. TK has another question. How do you talk with family and friends about mental health issues?
It's a good question. It depends on the family member. It depends on the relationship. I think by and large, if you're the child and it's a parent, parents want to know how to fix. I know it's annoying because we don't always want them to fix, but parents like to take action. What can I do? And so I always tell people, like, keep it to a couple bullet points of what you need them to know and what you're comfortable with sharing. So let's say you're feeling anxious. You can say, I've just been struggling lately, feeling on edge. And I'd really like to see someone. So then we have a couple points, right? And then we get into what we need from them. So I would need you to help me pay for therapy or take me to therapy or anything like that. And practice saying it ahead of time so that it's not the first time the words come out of your mouth. So you don't, freeze and forget everything.
Yeah.
And the same goes for friends and other loved ones. I think keeping it short to like what you need them to know and then what you'd need them to help you with. And then at the end, you can always say, like, I would love to keep talking about this, but that's all I'm comfortable with right now. So that they know it's just the beginning of a conversation. I think often when we have uncomfortable conversations, we feel like we have to get it all out at once. And that's not how life is. Like, people have to learn along with us. We need to give them time to digest. We need to digest ourselves as we learn more. But if you have a word, like let's say it's your partner or your spouse, and you say, my therapist just diagnosed me with major depressive disorder. I'm learning about it. I would really love it if you would also try to learn about it so that I would feel, it helped me feel more supported.
Yeah.
And I think that those are all great ways to start. But always say it first, even if it's just to yourself in your car or in the mirror. It just takes the edge off.
Yeah. I definitely understand and empathize to anyone who's ever had to have that conversation, how easy it is to become like an emotional wreck because you think you know exactly what you're going to say, and then you get there and you're like, there's this thing I want to tell you, and like I don't know how to say it, and just a little practice never hurts anyone. So.
Totally. It reminds me of when I was a kid and I would get sick at school and I'd call my mom to pick me up and I'd be like, totally fine. Like, I just don't feel good. I have a bad stomach ache or something.
Yeah.
And then the nurse would make you call your mom to come get you. And I'd be like, ooh, like you cry immediately. And that's what we can do, right? We can get like overly emotional if we're not prepped.
Yeah.
Prepped to talk about it.
Yeah. Excellent. Good question, y'all. So let's go back. I've got some questions here. Can we talk about these rumors? I've heard rumors that you might be working on a second book. Is this true?
Yes. Those rumors are true. Oh. Don't always believe the rumors, but you can when it comes to this. I'm writing my second book. It's all about trauma, and particularly like shared trauma with social media. That's not the whole part of it, but that is like the gist of what it is. So right now I'm just starting. Essentially, I'm in the midst of writing chapter 4 out of, I think, 14 chapters. So just getting along. It's a little bit easier than the first one, but it's harder for different reasons. I'm not a trauma specialist, so it's a lot more me calling colleagues, emailing people, asking my viewers for stories to help, give a face or a better descriptor to a symptom or something like that. I'm excited about it. I always worry, even with the first one, I was like, I hope it's not a turd. You put all this effort in. Writing a book has given me so much like more empathy for other authors and people who get like horrible reviews or something. I'm like, ooh, that would really hurt. So there is that like little bit of, I don't know if it's what's the word? It's like the syndrome where you don't think, imposter syndrome, where it's like, what am I doing? I definitely still have some of that, but I'm just trying to be, thoughtful and move through it at the speed with which I am able. And so yes, second book, it'll probably come out next summer, fall, somewhere around there. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's all the things. It's affected all the things. It was probably like a month ago, my editor, because we were finalizing everything, like, because for those of you who don't know, when you write a nonfiction book, you don't write the book and then sell the book. You write a proposal and usually chapter outlines and a first chapter. So my editor that I'd worked with, it's the same one that I worked with on this book. I love Dan. He's great. So anyway, he'd already loved it and talked about it. We'd, had these conversations. Yes, he's interested, all that stuff. And then he was like, hey, can we get a call in the books? I'd like to talk about this a little bit more. And he was like, we have to pivot. I think this needs to, we need to make sure we're including stuff about the coronavirus. I'm not sure how you see it fitting in, but I just want to put that on, out in there into the ether so that you can figure out how to weave it in. And to that end, I even emailed him just the other day and was like, hey, I know that transgenerational trauma was supposed to be part of the second chapter about complex PTSD. However, in light of the Black Lives Matter and all of that, I really think it should be its own chapter. What do you think about that? And he was like, definitely, I agree. Please include that. So unlike the first book where it was like, this is what you're going to write about, these are the chapters, this is definitely more fluid. And he's even asked if I think the coronavirus should be its own chapter. That was the feedback he gave me just yesterday. And I don't know if it will be a whole chapter because I'm already kind of weaving it in. We'll see, right? It's just as someone who's super organized and like structure, it's a little bit unnerving, but we'll keep moving forward. And then as far as the writing process, it was hard for me to get going at first. I definitely put it off for a couple of weeks just because I was feeling overwhelmed and couldn't focus, and tried to just give myself permission to feel that way. But then there's a silver lining that there aren't a lot of events I have to go to. There are no events. So it's like the one time that it's okay to be stuck at home is when you have to write. So yeah, so all sorts of things, but it's definitely shifted things. It's definitely, the book will be a little different because of it. And he even mentioned, my editors, we may want to get this out sooner rather than later. And I still don't know about that, but obviously I'll keep everybody posted. But, I can only write as fast as I can write. So, there's no rush order on a book.
And I imagine it's probably been the same for you. And I think maybe you just mentioned this a little bit. I've been doing live streams on my channel because there's a certain part of me that just can't muster the energy to do something creative, to do something sit down and just write. So,
it's hard.
Yeah.
It can feel, it's like when we're already overwhelmed, creativity or that energy just isn't there. Mm-hmm. It's really hard to come by. So yeah, when I feel inspired and I'm like, ooh, I want to write about this, then I just take that opportunity and do that.
Just a shout out to a local hero here in British Columbia. Her name is Bonnie Henry, and she is Dr. Bonnie Henry. She is our provincial health advisor person, and she's been in charge of everything COVID. And she's been doing such a really good job at supporting people and recognizing and helping people understand that what's going on right now impacts people emotionally as much as it does physically, and probably more broadly it impacts people emotionally. And one thing that she says over and over again is, she's such a great person. There's going to be t-shirts about her soon. Today is not forever. And I think that having that kind of perspective to help us get from one day to the next is super important, because I remember back in March when things were really kicking off here in British Columbia, where we were getting 80 to 100 cases every day. And people were dying. And with the advantage of hindsight, we've gone 4 days in British Columbia without anyone dying.
Wow.
Yeah, and we have gone we had a 3-day run where there were no new cases, and now
That's
it's
amazing.
Maybe 10. There was a while when it was 4 cases. So this is me coming to you from the future. If you don't live in British Columbia, things will get better. Just take it one day at a time. This is not forever. This is just for today.
It's true. And I think that's a good thing to always remember with anything in life. I'm always telling my patients, feelings are just feelings. They don't have to last forever. Situations aren't forever. Even though, it can feel like that, we have to be reminded that if you look back, I always try to tell my patients, I'm if you look back 2 years ago, would you imagine that you'd be where you are now? Mm-hmm. No, we can never imagine. Yeah. So just think of that now when it feels like this is really uncomfortable. It's hey, we will move past it. We always have things, tomorrow's a new day.
For sure. A couple more questions from the audience, and I mentioned this in the chat already, but just to clarify to you, these are going to be slightly anonymized to be made more useful for more people. So Caitlin, 1872, wants to know how they can deal with a family member who is asking for regular updates or asking, like, getting somewhat intrusive about double checking on their mental health and in perhaps fairly intrusive ways.
Gotcha. Boundaries. Those are difficult. I think when it comes to difficult conversations like this, I've mentioned this with my audience a few times. I call it like a hug and roll. And if you don't watch Friends, you don't know what I'm talking about. But Ross talks about how he rolls Rachel away. Like she likes to sleep on him, but then his arm goes numb. So he's like, I hug and I roll. And I think emotionally we can do that to people when we know they have good intentions, but it's coming across in a way that's very harmful for us. And so the way that we can hug and roll is we start by saying, thank you. Thank you so much for checking in on me. It really means a lot to know that you care. And then we roll. So then we say something like, however, checking in this often or asking about that, I find myself getting defensive and I'm working on that. So we make it about us. I'm working on that. But what I would love for you to do is, so then we give them action, right? What I'd love for you to do is, maybe only check in on me once a week or whatever. And I'm happy, or you can say, what I would love for you to do is wait for me to come to you, because now that we have this dialogue, I feel comfortable doing that. And I'll come to you if anything changes or, so we have to open the conversation. So try to find a way that you can hug and roll from people in your life who really have the best of intentions, but can come across as a little bit smothering or helicopter-y or just really intrusive when it's like none of their damn business.
Yeah, for sure. Excellent. Hopefully that helps you out, Caitlin. Skis and Snows 92 wants to know if you have any advice for gently guiding someone into starting therapy.
It's tricky. First of all, I have to say we can't make anybody get better. I know it sucks. It's hard to watch someone struggle and know that there's something there that could help them and they just won't do it. We can't. I release you from responsibility. You're only responsible for yourself. But what we can do is we can share our own experience and encourage behavior. So we can say things like, therapy's been really beneficial for me. And since you've been sharing that you're having a tough time, maybe look into it. And you can then, if you have any questions about it, I'm happy to help. And then just checking in. Hey, how are you doing? I know you told me you're having a tough time. Like I said, if there's any way I can help you see someone or help you start that process, let me know. But if you also feel like maybe they'll just shut down at even the mention, you can just start sharing your experience where applicable. So when they're saying they're having a tough time, you could say like, yeah, I was that way a few years ago. And my friend kept telling me to see someone. And it was weird. Like, this is how I started the process. You start telling the story. But again, we can't make them do it. I know it's hard, but we can just check in, be available, and support where we can. But also just remembering that, like, you can't light yourself on fire to keep someone else warm. So know your availability and your ability to reach out and help them and hold true to that. If you're having a down day, you don't have to talk to them that day or see them. It can be a lot of energy out supporting someone. So make sure that you're balancing your own self with their needs.
Excellent advice. Katerina Vavrova, hopefully I said that right. There's some accents.
I'm always messing up names, don't worry.
Asks, how do you get your family to respect your personal space? Even when I bring up something that bothers me, they apologize, but they still do it.
I think bringing it up, and then what's hard, but what we can practice is reminding them, because it's a habit. A lot of times, especially in our families, we have these, I call them family dances. Like if our family's used to doing the square dance, and then we're like, no, I want to do the Macarena. They're like, what? And so that's kind of what we're doing. So we have to keep teaching them the new behavior. So it's like, if we don't want them in our space, like I just imagine like teenage me, like, get out of my room, right? I need my personal space. I'm pushing boundaries. Just give me the space. So if you said like, hey, I need some alone time, every day I need like a half hour or an hour of just like space, and they keep popping into your room, it would be nice. Like the nicest way to approach that is to say something like, Mom, I love you, but this is kind of my personal time. Remember I mentioned, so I know this is weird, but we're going to try to get used to that. Okay. And just like explaining yourself over and over. I know it's exhausting. We wish they just got it, but that behavior didn't happen overnight. And so we won't change it overnight. And that's why new boundaries and new new dances take a little while to learn. And so just be a little patient, be okay with saying it over and over, in the nicest way possible. Again, always making it about yourself. Like, I mentioned this to you. I know it's hard to learn. I need the space because of this. And so I really appreciate you trying this with me. Make it about you. And that should hopefully like stop them from getting defensive or shouting or making anything escalate.
Excellent. And I do just want to give another shout out to TK, who's doing a great job at referring people to your various content that covers the things that people are asking about. And shout out to everybody in the chat who's supporting each other. I find
TK is the best. She's always helping the community.
That sounds like it. Skis and Snows, thank you, Katie, and thanks, TK. I'll be sure to. See? There you go. People appreciating.
Boom. I love it.
So we've talked about the process of writing a book, and we've talked about YouTube videos, but I hear that you might be, or you may have begun starting to reach out into new media,
yes,
like the
the earbuds. Yeah, my husband and I have launched 2 podcasts. I want to say one with my husband is just called Opinions That Don't Matter, and it is just that. It is not mental health related. It's not serious. It's just us talking about things, sharing funny stories, anecdotes, ridiculousness. It's really a distraction, which it's almost good that it exists now, because sometimes we just need a distraction from all the chaos. And I think that came out, we started that in like January, February. And then my Ask Katie Anything is just that. You ask me questions and I answer them. I answer about 10 in a podcast. And the podcasts are about an hour long. So it gives me some time to just like explain my thought process, things I wonder, questions I would have if you were my patient, things that I would want you to look into. And so that's definitely more mental health driven. And that comes out, they're both available where podcasts are. And mine comes out every Thursday and Sean and I's comes out every Saturday. And yeah, podcasts are fun. I've always loved, I'm a huge podcast listener. And so I was scared, not scared. It's just like, how do I do this? Are people going to listen? Is it something people want? Is it something I can continue to do? Because I don't like to ever start something that I can't continue and can't uphold. Like, I'm going to release every Thursday. I like in therapy and everything, I think setting expectations and holding to that is very important. Consistency is very key for healthy relationships. So I like to keep that with my community. But yeah, podcasts are fun. I really enjoy the long form. And it's kind of, to be truthful, because I've been doing mental health stuff for so long, having that outlet with Sean and that goofiness is kind of fun. It's like, it's a free space. Get to be Katie, not therapist Katie, just like Katie on the regular.
Well, I feel like I assume, maybe not, you've met Lindsay Doe before?
Yes, love Lindsay Doe.
So Lindsay and I are like best friends. And I was so stoked when she had me come out to Missoula, I don't know, a couple of years ago to be on the Sexplanations podcast. And we just talked about stuff, and it was such a blast. It was very much like this, which I think is like, as a YouTuber, you don't always get to do, because like when you do a video, there's a certain amount of production and preparation, and like for me anyways on my channel, I do lots of research to make sure that I get the stuff right, because I have a lot of, and like at least with a podcast, like and this isn't to say that there isn't editing that goes into it, but it can be a lot more off the cuff. It can be a lot more informal, and there's something really nice about that, which I think is kind of what's behind that the joke of like, everyone's just starting a podcast, why not start? But of course, what people don't understand is that to actually produce a podcast, there's a lot that goes into it. Like when you make a YouTube video, like it tends to be like 15 minutes of editing maybe for every minute of footage. And for a podcast, it can be much more than that, and podcasts tend to be longer. So kudos to you and Sean for sitting down and doing that. Ooh, that's a lot of work.
Yeah, it is. I mean, we don't edit them much for that very reason, just because it's like a time constraint. But I do agree with you. Like, my videos are very much researched. I often link out to like research articles and like things to like, so if you want to dig into it more. And sometimes I feel like I'll start a video topic and I'll be like, how am I going to get all that information in 10 minutes? Because I'm like, this has been like 30 years of research. Like it's hard to squish it all. And so podcasts, I think, leave room for also new information, right? And learning, which I think that's the thing that I enjoy the most about them is like, I get to learn from you as you share information. Like, I didn't know that libraries are a great place to find local resources.
Mm-hmm.
How cool is that?
Yeah.
And you wouldn't necessarily think to include that in a video.
Right.
But as we have a conversation, then more people can learn from it. And I think that's really great. So, yeah.
Yeah, cool. I think we're coming up on time.
Okay.
Before we go, is there any media that you have consumed lately that you just has blown you away that you think everybody should go check out?
Ooh, I mean, there's a lot of stuff. I have a couple things. Okay. So first of all, if you haven't watched Mindhunter on Netflix, it's a great show.
Okay.
It's about like one of the first, I don't even know what they would call him, but like a criminal's, probably TK knows the name of like what his term is, what he's calling himself, but he essentially learns about serial killers.
Okay.
Studying their behavior.
Yeah. Like
very fascinating.
Cool. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. It's like, I'm trying to think of what it is, like a psychological profiler.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
I'm not sure if that's his term or not.
Yeah.
So I don't want to I don't know if he's a psychologist. I forget. But anyways, great show. I'm watching that. Love it. And then, I mean, if you need a break, Grace and Frankie, great show also.
Nice.
But as far as content, because I'm writing a book about trauma, and the chapter I'm in right now is about the ACEs study, which I think is very fascinating. It's adverse childhood experiences. Everybody should know about it. We should share it with people. More parents, more people should know about this. But Dr. Nadine Burke Harris is like so awesome. If you don't know who she is, look her up. She has a TED Talk. It's beautiful. Cool. Super informational. She has a book that came out, The Deepest Well. Love it. So I've been deep in her stuff, and she's really, really great. She herself had like a really tough childhood, and she is California's first ever Surgeon General.
Oh, cool.
And she's amazing. So anyways, I encourage people to check her stuff out. She's really great. And I just finished a book by Brené Brown, Braving the Wilderness. Nice. Love that book.
Brené Brown is a classic, like, emotional health kind of person.
Yeah, so good.
Awesome. I'm trying to think if I have. I've been watching a lot of Community because I need something. And then
I watch the Office reruns. I feel you. I get that.
Yeah. I've been working my partner through Deep Space Nine, and we've made it to season 7, and it's gonna get intense. Star Trek Deep Space Nine, for those of you who don't.
Oh yes.
Yeah. What else? One thing I do want to put out there, just as my own contribution to the Black Lives Matter gestalt, as it were, is so one thing I've noticed is that there is a lot, and this is great, there's so many resources out there for folks to learn about anti-racist behavior, like how to become anti-racist. But I also want to encourage people to seek out content that isn't necessarily about anti-racist stuff by Black creators. And I want to give a big shout out to a YouTube channel called Say It Loud, which is made by PBS Digital Studios and produced by a couple of Black women. And it's just all about the history and culture of Black people in North America. And it is great.
How interesting.
Yeah.
I love history stuff too.
Yeah, and it's
that's really cool.
It's like part history, but also it explains the history as a way to explain like why things are the way they are now. Like historically Black colleges and universities, why those are a thing. What's up with like Black sounding names? Like it's not just it's a Black sounding. There's a reason that they are that way. Yeah, all things like that. So seek things that aren't necessarily the heavy stuff by Black creators.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah. And I think that's about it. So we're at 1:54, so I guess I'll just say thank you so much for being here.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you to everybody who has questions, who asked questions. Looks like there's one that we didn't get to. But you might want to tweet that or ask Katie. Katie, is there a good way to ask you questions? Twitter's fine. Usually below a video before it goes live. Or if you're looking, I'll ask for the podcast like next Monday. Check the community tab of my podcast channel, Opinions That Don't Matter, and you can ask it there. Cool. Awesome. Well, everybody, thank you so much again for being here. And until next time, don't forget to ask questions. Thank you. All right. And I just got to figure out how to end the stream. End.